This car is a piece of micro-segment genius. Not only is it a small SUV, which Australians can't get enough of, but it's also a full-fat R, costing around $6,000 less than the equivalent Golf. What's the catch? Well, we're going to find out. And we're also going to let you know how it compares to its only real main rival, the Kona N. And we're going to let you in on all the details about its pricing and its specs, so stay tuned for that. But before we do, remember to check out the full written review over at carsguide.com.au, where you can also check out all sorts of interesting Volkswagen news, like what's going on with the future of R and how the brand is overcoming its stock issues. Now, you want to know how the T-Roc is a proper VW R, and the easiest way to explain this is to just jump straight into its engine and transmission. Yes, the T-Roc R is powered by the critically acclaimed EA 888 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine, and in this case it produces 221 kilowatts and 400 newton meters of torque. But wait, you say, I'm a Volkswagen enthusiast and I know that the Golf 8R produces 235 kilowatts from the same engine, and that's true. This is an older state of tune, more akin to what was in the previous generation Mark 7.5 Golf R. And it also misses out on a couple of other things compared to the Golf 8 as well. It doesn't have the interesting dual clutch pack trick diff at the rear, and that means it also doesn't get the fancy drift mode that the Golf 8R has, and nor does it have the Nürburgring mode or some of those other fancier drive modes. So that's worth keeping in mind as well. But it has more power and torque than the Kona N, and it's got all-wheel drive, and that leaves it in a really unique space in the small SUV hierarchy. It's now the performance king. But does that make it good to drive? Let's see. Oh yes! It's easy to forget how fast the T-Roc R is, because it's so tame around town. We did a city loop before we came out here to these kind of countryside B roads, and around town it's quiet, it's tame, you don't even really hear that sporty exhaust system that they've put on the car. And then you put it into a race mode and enjoy it on a road like this, and I was shocked just how much torque just keeps arriving from that engine as you depress the accelerator further. It truly is performance from a small SUV, not quite like anything else on the market. Sure, the Kona N is there, but with the all-wheel drive and things like the progressive steering that the T-Roc R offers, it is a different beast entirely. Now, performance is very similar to that previous generation Mark 7.5 Golf, and that means because you're not getting things like the trick diff and the extra power from the new Mark 8R, it's not going to be as good a corner carver. But it's not going to be as good a corner carver anyway, because it's an SUV, and naturally you've got the drawback of sitting further off the ground. It actually makes it a little bit terrifying in the corners because you can take them quite fast. It's got a lot of traction from that all-wheel drive system, and there are excellent tires clad onto these wheels, so it will handle corners really well. But it's just the fact that you're getting thrown about side to side as you're enjoying what it has to offer, and it's just not as secure or safe feeling as something like the Golf R or the Tiguan R, for example, which is heavier and also has that all-wheel drive system, so it feels like it's got your back in the corners. This car's also, because of its SUV ride height, a little bit bouncy. Again, doesn't have the weight of the Tiguan R, so when you hit a few bumps, especially in the corners, you're being sprung about a lot compared to the Golf and compared to the Tiguan. So it's very different from those two products when you've got it up on a country road like this. It's very interesting. It's lightweight, so it feels quick, but it also feels a little bit less stable, I suppose, a little bit less safe, a little bit less encouraging as those other two are products. So that's interesting. And that having been said, it's not as though it is actually less safe. It just feels that way because of the gravity throwing you about and the lack of weight on offer from this platform. 0 to 100 time is 4.9 seconds, so it is extremely fast in a straight line as well for a small SUV, and the Kona N will do that in 5.5 seconds, so you do get bragging rights there as well. Now, while it doesn't feel as secure on the road as the Golf R or the Tiguan, I am yet to elicit even a squeak out of these tyres, so it is quite well planted. And the progressive steering tune, which firms up quite a lot when you've got it in a corner, does help with that confidence as well. And it makes this product feel a little bit more premium. Like, there is a premiumness to like the way you sit in this car, the softer trims in it, that genuinely is communicated. It doesn't feel like this is just a cheap SUV with a really big engine. This feels like a more comprehensive offering. Now, that engine does sound fantastic in race mode. This is one of the better sounding 4-cylinders on the market, and you can just hear it bark like that. It's fantastic. The drawback of this T-Roc though is it's a little bit noisy too, because it does have those enormous wheels, and there's even a little bit of wind noise as well. So on the context of a rough course bit of tarmac, or even on the freeway, it's probably one of the noisier Volkswagen products. It's even noisier than lesser versions of the T-Roc, so that's worth keeping in mind as well. It's maybe not as refined as it could be, but that's the trade-off with having a go-fast SUV like this with big wheels and an angry engine. Oh, geez, it is really quite bouncy, and the ride does approach its limits when you do hit some of those bigger bumps just because of the massive wheels on this car. But around town, it's also really comfy. This is one of the few cars that can truly do both. Like, you could drive this car around every day, even on Sydney roads, and yeah, there'll be the occasional uncomfortable bump, but it's not as though it's a real deal breaker like it can be for some hot hatches on the market. It's still relatively tame to drive around city streets, and then you can really have fun with it out on the road. And there are precious few cars, especially small SUVs, that are truly capable of doing that. So my hat's off to Volkswagen for achieving it. Okay, so it's got the famous engine, it's got all the R bits that you know and love, but how much does it all cost, and how does it compare to what else is out there? Let's take a look. The T-Roc R wears a before on-roads price tag of $59,300, making it the entry point to the R family. As previously noted, this makes it around $6,000 cheaper than the Golf 8R, already a bargain, even with a few key innovations missing. However, its key rival in the space, the Hyundai Kona N, makes your money go even further, with a similar setup costing a smidge under $50,000, $10K cheaper again. The Kona N's key weakness, though, is the fact that it channels a similar amount of power just through the front wheels. Perhaps disappointingly, that's pretty much it when it comes to rivals, unless you're willing to stretch to something like the Audi SQ2, which is effectively the exact same car as what we're looking at here, just from Audi. It also costs over $66,000. The T-Roc's effective monopoly on the hot all-wheel drive small SUV space doesn't mean you miss out on equipment though. Massive 19-inch alloy wheels, adaptive suspension, an R body kit, Napa leather interior trim, premium versions of the brand's digital dash cluster and multimedia touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connectivity, wireless phone charging, as well as boring but necessary stuff like LED headlights and keyless entry. You get the idea. Safety is good too. We'll take a look at that in a second. But of course, the T-Roc is an SUV, so it should be practical as well. Is it? Let's have a look. Now, there are a few interesting spec areas where the R version of the T-Roc stands above the rest of the range. It's not just the bigger engine and the performance enhancements. This car also gets the full 9.2-inch multimedia touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay and a wireless matching charger, although it doesn't get dials for volume and tuning and things. You do have to operate everything with the touch function, so that's something to keep in mind as well. It's got the large digital dash in there with a sort of blue R theme, and this car that we're testing now also has matching blue inlays, which are an option, but only when you get the blue paint on the outside of this car as well. Now, the seats, they're not buckets, but they are leather-clad seats with extra bolstering over something like the base model car, and that's nice to see as well. It does feel a little bit dated because the T-Roc has been around for quite a while, even though the R is brand new. So that's something to keep in mind as well, and it's not different from like the Tiguan, for example. It's just not the Golf 8, which is truly impressive on the inside and feels like a brand new car. As you might remember from our previous T-Roc reviews, space is more than sufficient for an adult in the rear seat, although the middle seat is particularly small thanks to a large transmission tunnel needed to facilitate that all-wheel drive system. In the case of the R, the quality seat trim matches for rear passengers, and there's USB-C to improve connectivity in the T-Roc range this time around. The R has an unencumbered boot capacity of 392 litres, larger than both the Golf R and the Kona N. I reckon the T-Roc R looks pretty good too, but not too good. Let me explain. One key trait of all Volkswagen R products is how subtle they are. It's hard to tell them apart from any other Volkswagen on the road. And that's a good thing, because sometimes when you pull up at the school pickup, you don't want those kind of judgmental looks about how garish your go-fast SUV is. But the T-Roc really takes it to the extreme with these subtle fittings all around, with the only real indicator that this is a go-fast one being those big wheels, the quad exhaust at the back, and the little spoiler that juts out the rear as well. This play it safe theme extends to the T-Roc's interior, which also shares the same issues as the rest of the R range, in that it's nearly indistinguishable from other variants. While the bucket seats are an improvement, there's otherwise little wow factor to indicate that this is an R, something made worse by the fact that out of the Golf, Tiguan and T-Roc, the T-Roc has the most dated feeling appointments. I hope you weren't planning on penny pinching on fuel, because like any go-fast product, the T-Roc doesn't take it easy on consumption. Still, with the modern engine and dual-clutch transmission, fuel consumption isn't as bad as you might expect at just 7.4 litres to 100 kilometres. Now our test car here is getting 9.5 litres to 100 kilometres as we carve up these country roads here, and that's really not too bad. It doesn't sip fuel, but I suppose there is a knock-on benefit for fuel efficiency for having that dual-clutch automatic. The T-Roc R will need to drink top-shelf unleaded fuel. The entire T-Roc range has a relatively impressive suite of active safety items, including auto barn speed, auto emergency braking, as well as standard stuff like 6 airbags. It is worth noting that the T-Roc doesn't gain the enhanced safety suite from the new Golf 8, and it's also specifically excluded from the SUV's maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating awarded in 2017. Hop over to the full review at carsguide.com.au for our full rundown of all the safety equipment in the T-Roc range. Volkswagen stays the course with its 5-year and unlimited kilometre warranty, with a set of matching cap price service programs for the updated T-Roc range. See prices specific to the R variant on your screen now. Programs are a tad expensive, not unexpected for a performance car like this, and it's also notable that VW's warranty doesn't specifically cover track use like its Kona N rival. Purely because it's an SUV, I reckon the T-Roc R is going to sell really, really well. But that's not to say that Volkswagen haven't done a great job putting this car in a unique spot in the small SUV space. It offers more performance than the Kona N at a price that's even less than its Golf 8R relation. And that's a thing of brilliance. And it sets the new standard for mainstream performance small SUVs.